Muy buenas noches y gracias por estar con nosotros cada viernes llevando las informaciones que ustedes necesitan para que la comunidad esté bien informada. Este viernes es un viernes muy especial porque tenemos con nosotros al juez David Kirchner, que ya tiene bastante tiempo y van a escuchar de él mismo las informaciones y yo trataré de hacer la traducción al español. Con nosotros está la abogada que siempre está con nosotros, Sally Atia, y ella va a estar haciendo la entrevista al juez. Sally, adelante.
Muy buenas noches a todos y gracias por darme esta oportunidad de hablar con ustedes y presentarte el juez Honorable David Kirchner. Good evening, Judge. Buenas noches.
Good evening, buenas noches, or is it buenas tardes still? And for us, it's only buenas tardes until the sun goes down, then it's buenas noches. But gracias, I really do appreciate you having me. It's wonderful. It's a great opportunity, and you're very, very welcoming. Thank you again for having me.
Our pleasure, Judge. Judge, so you're running in the election in November for one of the 6 Supreme Court seats here in Queens. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, sure. I've been in criminal court now. I was appointed by the mayor in 2016. I served in the Bronx until 2018. And then I came to Queens, my home borough. And I've been in criminal court since then. So I felt that I wanted to be able to serve the people of Queens as I've been doing in lower court in Supreme Court. And so I decided to try to obtain, and very thankfully and very graciously was able to do so.
Luis,
okay. Muy importante. Bueno, Sally le preguntaba al juez David de que lo lleva a correr para la posición. Ya él está en la boleta, ha sido aprobado por el demócrata y los republicanos también. Y él está diciendo que la experiencia que tiene en la corte Bronx y que ahora quiere venir a servir a la comunidad de Queens. Y nosotros pedimos a los votantes que nos siguen a nosotros que para noviembre busquen el nombre de él. Lo estaremos pasando durante el programa, durante los diferentes programas también. Y quizá él va a venir de nuevo antes de las elecciones de noviembre. Sally.
So, Judge, I don't know if you understood everything that Luis said, but he just said something very interesting. He said you've gotten the nomination not only from the Democratic committee, but also from the Republican committee. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, be delighted to. So, in the political world being as it is, everyone's got their various political views, and that's really what shapes the political landscape. And it provides voters with an opportunity to make a decision as to which politician and which political party best represents their particular views. When it comes to judges, first and foremost, we don't discuss politics. Political issues don't come into any play in any way with what we do. The only issue for us really is, are we capable and qualified to hold the position? So for me, to be able to go to whatever political spectrum, the liberals, the conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, and make a pitch that I think I am qualified, that I am worth having in Supreme Court was very important to me. Voters, I think, for the most part, don't generally know the judicial candidates. So they're probably going to decide on whatever political party puts them up. But what about the Republican voters who might look at me and say, something, not based on politics, but based on his credentials, based on what he's done, what he can and we expect him to do for the people of Queens, we think he'd be a good choice. And that's why it was very important to me. The electorate in November is going to come from both the left and the right. And I want to be able to tell everybody and get as many votes as I can from across the spectrum in that vein. So it was extraordinarily important to me, and I'm very gratified that I was able to successfully convince them that I am worth being on the ballot on their side as well.
El juez le contestó a Sally sobre la pregunta de estar nominado no solamente por el Partido Demócrata, sino también por el Partido Republicano, en donde él está hablando. Ellos en realidad no pueden hacer política, aunque son nominados por el partido político, sino su trabajo es basado en la cualificación que tiene cada uno. Y en este sentido él está hablando sobre la importancia. Muchas veces los votantes, y yo siempre también he mencionado esto en el show, que los votantes no se informan antes de ir a las elecciones para ir a hacer su voto. Y una de las partes de importancia son posiciones como esta. Sally.
So, Judge, you have been a judge already for the last 4 years. In criminal court. But prior to that, you've got quite the extensive and successful career. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience?
Well, it takes less time probably to explain it than to tell you exactly what I did. But I spent about 12 years as a prosecutor, about 6 years or so as a defense attorney, a little bit of time in private practice, but then the last 9 prior to being appointed, I was a court attorney, actually principal law clerk to 2 Supreme Court judges in the Bronx, both sitting in criminal term.
So, sorry, Luis.
No, it's okay, it's okay. Okay, acabo de mencionar que ha durado más de 4 años en la Corte Criminal, 12 años como prosecutor.
¿Fiscalía?
¿Una
fiscalía?
En la fiscalía también. O sea que la experiencia es algo que la tiene de sobra, básicamente, para que la comunidad que vota, para la comunidad que nos siga el programa, sepa que es basado en la cualificación para dar esta posición y que no se olviden de dar el voto.
So basically what you just told us is that you've been on prosecution, you've been on defense, you've been a clerk in the Supreme Court, a judge, which means you've basically done a lot of what a Supreme Court judge is obligated to do already. And you've been a sitting judge for the last 4 years.
That's correct. I've been doing criminal practice on all sides for quite some time.
That's quite impressive, Judge.
Well, it's been a very gratifying career. It really has.
So, Judge, why is it that you want to be a Supreme Court judge? Why do we want to elect you?
Very simply because I feel that I have the ability to serve in Supreme Court. You know, the only difference between Supreme Court and criminal court, well, I should say criminal term in Supreme Court, is you're handling the cases after the grand jury process instead of before. Now, they're still all criminal cases, and, you know, for the most part, they're all serious cases, even the lower level misdemeanors, because they affect somebody's life profoundly. So, you know, there is no such thing as a inconsequential or insignificant case, because to the litigants, they're all significant. It's just that in Supreme Court, you're dealing with the post-indictment, the felonies, indicted cases, and in criminal court, you're handling the misdemeanors, arraignments, and everything that happens prior to the grand jury returning an indictment. And with everything that I've done so far, both before the bench and currently on the bench, I think I'm particularly poised to be able to handle all of those matters in exactly the same way I'm handling the matters now, fairly, properly. I don't think that if you ask people who appear in front of me, whether they be litigants or lawyers, I don't think anyone will tell you that, you know, he's predisposed to, you know, being favorable to one side or the other, or he has his own views of what a case should be worth, and unless the lawyers agree, he's going to make a decision accordingly. I don't think that's what you hear. I think what you hear is he's going to give everybody a fair shot. He's going to look at every case independent of anything else. He's going to let the lawyers do what they have to do. To a point, obviously, I still have to manage the proceedings. and then make a decision based on whatever it is I'm asked to make, and do it fairly, dispassionately, and most importantly, properly, and what fits in that particular situation. Could be a little bit more lenient, it could be a little bit less lenient. It all depends on the facts and circumstances, and I look at each one by itself.
Sally le preguntó al juez sobre cuál era la razón de que él quiera correr a la Suprema Corte cuando realmente ya ha estado en varias cortes y ha ciertas posiciones que él ha tenido en las cortes menores. Y él está hablando de una cosa en donde lo más importante es, en este caso, ser justo y equitativo en cuanto a lo que es la administración, en este caso, de la ley, de los casos. No tener ninguna forma de que él menciona, no hay caso que sea insignificante, no hay caso pequeño, todos tienen cierto grado de importancia también. Sally.
Well, in full disclosure, Judge, I have appeared before you, and I concur with how you say people view you. Y quiero decir al mundo que yo estaba presentando en frente de esta juez, y sí, él está, ¿cómo se dice? Justo cuando él hace su trabajo. And I want to thank you for that, Judge.
Well, you know what, I appreciate that. And Sally, it's so important that when someone leaves the courtroom, they may not be happy. They're not necessarily happy being there. It's criminal court. In fact, funny anecdotal story. Sometimes when I accept a plea, a guilty plea from somebody, one of the questions that I normally ask them is I'll put the potential disposition on the record, and I'll say, is this what you wish to do? And every once in a while I will get, no, not really. It's probably the wrong question to ask, because they may not want to do it, but they've made a conscious decision to do it for any one of a number of reasons. That's not my business. I just want to make sure that it's voluntary and so their own free will. And I'll ask those questions. So they may not be happy about it, but here's the most important part. When they leave, they have to feel that they were treated fairly and that the result was proper and fair. They may be unhappy with it. I appreciate that, particularly in Supreme Court, when some of those sentences may be upstate prison. They're not going to be particularly happy about it. But at the same time, have I handled them and their case properly, fairly? Have I let them know that I put the time and the energy into it to get the proper result? Whether or not that's something that I have to make a ruling on, or whether or not it's a pre-agreed upon plea. And I really do think that's important. And I'll tell you a second really quick story. A number of times I've had individuals leave the courtroom, not to me, to the court officers, the court staff, and say, something I really appreciate. He spent time with me. He did what he had to do. There are a number of times where someone hasn't done their community service, and I will say, all right, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. You're going to leave the court and you're going to come back next week. I want you to register. If you don't register, we're going to have to do the jail alternative. One step at a time. And eventually, I'll bring them to the point where they are accomplishing what the original goal was. And I think and I know that they really appreciate that extended effort. And I want to be able to bring that to Supreme Court as well.
Bueno, el juez le está diciendo la situación de que en muchas ocasiones a veces las personas no se hallan totalmente conforme con las decisiones que haya tomado la corte, pero es uno de los trabajos en donde ellos tienen que tomar esas decisiones y va a hacerlo basado en lo que son las leyes. Estoy súper resumiendo cada una de las cosas. George, I know that in the biography that I saw, you said that you have written a few opinions or something. Can you explain a little bit about that so people can hear about that? What is the opinion and what is the benefit of the opinion in the court?
Are you referring to the judicial opinions or some of the articles that I've written?
Actually, I if I tell you the truth, I just read opinions.
So the difference is this. Interestingly, we refer to what we write in court as decisions. The word opinion is generally referred or reserved for when an appellate court makes its ruling, even though really we are giving our opinion. I'm not so sure why that is. I suspect that it's because in the trial court, the lower court, a decision is by one judge, and then an opinion by an appellate court panel is a review. Do they agree or disagree with what that decision was? But I think that's just semantics. Yes, I've written I don't know how many, but maybe hundreds of decisions on cases, whether they be asking me to dismiss the case because the allegations are not sufficient to support the legal charges, could be because a lawyer feels that their client's right to a speedy trial has been violated. And there are other number of different types of issues that could come up. When we make bail determinations, we don't generally write decisions on those. Those are usually made at arraignments, but those are still rulings as well. I don't know if you were thinking of those or if you were thinking of just articles that I've written. Last year, I wrote an article that appeared in the New York State Bar Journal, sort of documenting, cataloging, and reviewing the new bail reform legislation as well as the amendments. So those are two different types of things, but in both situations, they can be published. Most decisions are not published. They're written and put into a file. Few of them are published.
Thank you. Sally, keep going.
So, Judge, we know about your professional life. Tell us a little bit about the man behind the robe.
You mean the person that I was for most of my life before the robe?
Well, I mean, you do other things than practicing,
Yes.
well, as a judge. So tell us a little bit more about you.
I do. I'd like to look at that as my real self. You know, it's interesting. The most common misconception I think that we have when we put the robe on, not misconception, but that people could have is, the robe doesn't come with a crown, and nor does it come with a crystal ball. So, I'm not a king and I'm certainly not a prophet. And that's the way that I've always been well before the robe. And I like to think that I still am. And one of the main reasons is that I've always looked at my role. What am I here to do? What am I supposed to accomplish? I got a profession. I think I've done very well in the profession, and I think I'm a credit to the profession. I'm certainly not the end all be all. There are certainly plenty of people that could do anything that I've done and probably do it a lot better. But what makes me me is everything that I do outside. And so I've spent an enormous amount of time working in the community, things that really people aren't going to want to do. When no one was going to become president of the Civic Association, me and a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine, decided, all right, we'll take over the leadership. When there was nobody to take over the Jewish Community Baseball League, that I'm now president of for a number of years. Sadly, the fellow who, Mark Katz, may he rest in peace, was the president for 30 years. He passed away. They said, nobody wants to do it. All right, well, I coached in the league. Someone's got to do it. I'm going to do it. And so forth and so on. So no matter what it is, things have sort of found me because there was a need. So I did it. And it's worked out well for me. It's probably the stuff that, like I said, for the most part, makes me me. I have no intention of stopping. In fact, if anything, I've accumulated more things. Last year, I took over as president of my synagogue, and 2 years before that, I became an international director of my fraternity, Alpha Epsilon Pi, and I'm in there for the long haul. So I seem to keep acquiring. Brandeis Association, I'm on the board of as well. So I think that many people, live just so that they can work just so they can live. And I think that you got to live first, and you have to work because along the way, that's what you kind of got to do.
Sally le preguntó quién es el hombre después o debajo de la toga, y él ha hablado de su trabajo comunitario que ha tenido, del hombre, de la persona, del humano en cierto sentido ha sido la conversación, su envolvimiento con diferentes comunidades o más bien grupos y el trabajo hacia la comunidad. Sally, something else?
Yeah, I also noticed, Judge, you're still in touch with the young people. You're still a college professor, right?
Yes.
So
It's that's another thing. When I first took that position, I got it because how much money do you make as an assistant district attorney? So I needed the income, and I still like the income. But I love working with and mentoring and teaching students. A number of them have gone on to become interns of mine. Some of them have gone on to law school, although the majority of the students that I teach are accounting and finance majors or business majors. But yes, it's great. And one of the things that I think that's so important is we in the legal profession, we immerse ourselves in other legal efforts, bar associations, all sorts of things that are all in the profession network. I like going outside. One of the other things I absolutely love doing, and believe me, during the few months that we do, it takes an enormous amount of time, is I coach high school mock trial. And some of those students have gone on to become lawyers and my interns, but many of them as well don't. But the experience and the exposure that they get, the skill set of thinking on your feet, putting an argument together, processing information in a cogent, clear way, and then, of course, trying to argue it, public speaking, all of those things are skills that anyone in any profession could benefit from. So by doing that, yeah, I'm exposing them to law, and it may be the only exposure they have to law and lawyers, but they're getting a great skill set too.
Sally le preguntó que todavía él está muy conectado con la juventud y como profesor universitario, pues definitivamente tiene ese acercamiento. Él menciona de estudiantes de lo suyo que se han convertido en abogados, otros no, la situación. O sea que en realidad el punto donde nosotros queremos llegar en este caso es la cualificación de la persona en David Kirshner hacia la posición que él está buscando y llevarle esas informaciones a los que siguen el programa para que estén bien informados de las personas que nosotros traemos acá.
So, Judge, I think you've told us quite a bit about yourself and who you are. I think the community's gotten to know a little bit about you. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up and before we say thank you very much for being with us today?
Well, other than muchas gracias, no, that's not correct. It's muchas gracias to you. A funny story. Every once in a while, you'll hear, a politician. They want to, they go someplace to a community. They don't speak the language, so they want to try to say something in that language. And of course, since they don't speak it, it gets butchered. So I just decided, buenos noches, buenos tardes, gracias. I can do that. It's fine. Beyond that, not so much. No, there isn't really anything else. Since if there's something else that you think that they should know, I guess the only thing that I probably has come across already, I do sincerely want people to understand and to know how much irrespective of how much energy I put in outside and off the bench, I put as much, if not more energy in everything that I do in the courtroom. And that as much as, I have to be the referee, I have to be the manager, I also have to, make myself, to the extent that I can, invisible. Because much like when you go to a ball game, you're not there to see the referee. You're not there to see the umpire. You're there to see a game. I've played that game. I was a lawyer. I've done the litigation. It's my time now to do the other role. So when I have to, I will. I try not to. I really go very, very, as much as I can, let the lawyers be lawyers. Obviously, if it's going on too long, if it's getting repetitive, if there's, if the level of professionalism is starting to wane. Obviously, all of those things play into it. But I think the one thing that everyone should understand and appreciate about me is that no matter what and no matter who it is, I take each case seriously, I take each litigant seriously, and I take each lawyer seriously. And when they leave, I think they feel that. And I think that's perhaps the most important thing. My decisions, anyone can disagree with. Anyone can think they're wrong, and they may be wrong, and that's why we have an appellate court. But I don't think that anyone would think my decisions are irrational, are flippant, are in any way short shrifting anybody, let alone not thinking my way through it. And at the end of the day, I don't know what else you can really ask.
Okay, we thank you, Judge, for coming with us, and I hope that you can take the time again before the election day, okay, to come back to the show.
I would love to. I think I probably at this point should also ask people to support me as well. I didn't actually do
Sure,
it.
yes.
Well, I would love
that. So do it right now. Do it right now.
Well, if I've sold you, I would love to have your support on election day.
So I will continue to ask the people who follow the show every week. Don't forget about Judge Davey, okay? Don't forget and be prepared to cast the vote that day.
I appreciate that very much. I should say that I would love to come back at a time, and I don't know if I mentioned already, but I'm so appreciative of you working around my schedule, particularly the Sabbath. But I would love to come back and have an opportunity to answer questions from potential voters. I would love to do that, as long, of course, as they understand that I'm not allowed to answer anything politically. When I went to the Republican committee, the convention was done a little bit differently than the Democratic convention, and they had me come in and speak first. So they opened it up for questions. They said, "Would I take?" Of course, I'll take questions. But I said, with one caveat: I'm not permitted to give an opinion on any political matter or take political positions. And I'm not allowed to comment on any pending case anywhere in the United States. And the first person said, "Well, now you just took my question away." But I would love the opportunity to do that.
Sure. Okay, so be prepared at least 2 weeks before the election. Will be great. Okay,
that would be great.
We're gonna put that in our calendar so we won't forget. Right, Sally?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, George, thank you very much for being with us tonight and waiting for the 2 weeks prior to the election. Have you again, okay?
That's great, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it'll go pretty quickly. And thank you both, and Sally, it was nice to see you.
Thank you, and thank you.